this way. Here we go. Because I have been told it doesn't matter how much you spend, it matters how much you save.
That's what she said.
Bucket list car. Not on the bucket list. All right, let's go in here and do something real painful. Now we wait for the world's longest part numbers. Yeah, you better believe we inspected this thing before we got out of Summit. I'm sure you've seen by the thumbnail and the reason why you clicked on this video. Today we're gonna go over the performance designed carbon pTR intake for the LS1 style engine. They also make a rectangular port. If you're like me and you've done a couple of LS swaps, you'd learned real quick that the stock Trailblazer SS intake does make the most power in the usable range, like for street driving. Sure, there's aftermarket ones that make more power above like 6,000 RPM, but let's be honest, for guys like me, how much time am I really spending there? We actually used that high-rise Holley on the blue F100 that we built, and it really did suffer on the low-end power, but it looked amazing. It made a ton of power up top, which we didn't really spend any time. I know these things aren't just brand new on the market, but it was kind of new to me, and I was super excited to give it a shot. So I thought, why not do a video including the unbox, the install, and some performance results. And as pretty as these appeared to be online, I certainly didn't want to risk any shipping errors. So there's the box, and then inside here, little hardware kit. Let's get to it. Okay, first glance, it does look amazing. On the website and most of the things that I've seen, it looked like it had much higher gloss finish, like a clear coat over the top. This actually looks like more just raw carbon fiber, which to me is kind of cool because I like that natural look. And this is literally just a sticker. So we may pull that off because, you know, this isn't a sponsored video, but it could be. Maybe a little better shot of the finish for you guys. And I did opt for this red anodized throttle body flange. They're all 4-bolt. You can't get the 3-bolt style. And see where there's 3 locations to mount the fuel rails based on what injectors that you have. There's already O-rings on the head side of this intake. So that tells me, you know, you're gonna save a little bit by not having those factory style gaskets required. On the bottom side, looks like only this vacuum port is drilled and tapped. And then I remember looking at the instructions, it gives you the option of drilling through certain areas on the bottom of this based on what sensors that you're gonna use. Like they already have them drilled and tapped, but they're not open to the inside of the intake. So let's crack her open. As you can see, it ships with what they consider their long runners, and a 9-inch runner is one of the longest I've seen in an aftermarket intake. A lot of those short runner intakes, you can brag about what the horsepower number is at the top of the RPM band, but like we said earlier, it certainly suffers in the low RPM torque, which is really what you need driving around. There's no mistaking which runners you have, because if you check on the website, you can see the mid-length and the short ones look considerably different. The short ones are almost non-existent. All they do basically is create like a little horn effect right into the lower portion of this plenum. One of the cool things I like, Holley does this as well, is they offer the lower portion of this as a separate part number. So say you buy this for your current engine like we have with cathedral ports, and then one day we upgrade to a rectangular port engine, we can just buy the lower and keep the expensive top half. If you did want to change your runner lengths, they offer these little notches right here that you can put a pick inside and pull the O-ring out. And once you do that, it'll allow you to push this adapter down and rotate it. Get this last little bit counterclockwise, and then it'll slide up. I show that to you guys because all the research I did, I thought maybe you could turn these at a different angle, but you clearly can't. They only lock in one place. Also, I notice the gasket between the upper and lower is already installed. I do see little bits and pieces of like this plastic in here kind of loose. So it's a good opportunity. Make sure you take that off when you buy this thing and clean it out real well. Also, you're gonna need to from drilling out which map sensor or manifold air temp sensor that you're gonna run. And if you need vacuum for your brake booster, like we certainly will. Again, it doesn't need drilled, but the other ones will, so you might as well clean up whatever junk's in here when you're all finished. So in an attempt to make the best videos on the internet, I downloaded an app, kind of like a draggy thing, and we're gonna go run the truck with this Trailblazer SS intake. Keeping in mind that the truck was tuned for this, with this intake on it, so we're not probably gonna do the follow-up run with it retuned yet, because I'm not really sure he's gonna have time to get to it. Let's hope that thing works. We're not getting traction anyway. Well, that clearly was a fail on my part. Probably not the best software either, to be honest with you. But I can trust that my butt dyno will recognize that if this new intake will allow this truck to still burn through first and second gear from a dead stop, it's going to be a win since it's going to look that good. Nothing left to do but get rid of this Trailblazer SS intake. We've put about 4,000 miles on this truck since we built it, and it's kind of nice sometimes to just get in here and look around and see how things are. And I'm gonna say things are pretty good, because good or bad, they all look the same. So either they're all good or they're all bad, and the truck starts and runs. So I'm going with all good. So here's the GM intake, and for science, I set the camera up and kind of get a light in there the best I could, and then put this piece of hose up that intake port to measure, and it came out to about right here. It's just over 9 inches, about 9 1/4, which I'm not really sure how you measure it. Is the inside run or the outer run? Or you take the difference between the shortest and the longest route to come up with something. So I figured that's pretty close. I wanted to use that same method or theory, and we put the hose in the performance design intake till it came out. Again, do we measure it from the back or to the front or somewhere in the middle? Let's go with there, I suppose, or right in there. That brings us to here, which is exactly 9 inches. I'm gonna pretty confidently say there's about a 1/4 inch difference between these runners. It wasn't super scientific, but again, you've got that much air volume able to flow through there, so how do you get right down to the gnat's behind? Here's something you won't find in the instructions, but is very important if you're gonna do this swap. By the way, Don't worry about this bracket. I just made that so we could run the truck style cover on top of this ugly Trailblazer intake. This is your manifold air pressure sensor. It's held down with this little clip. And if you have a truck, you probably have something that looks like this, which will not work on this intake because it's too low. And well, where the sensor feed is too low on the housing. It doesn't fit in these holes that they've left for you. And the instructions will show some type of LS1 type of map sensor. And this is what pulls up, like when I looked it up on O'Reilly's, and it was not at all cheap. It's this part number. But as you can see, it's the same connection type as your truck map sensor, but look where it's located, way more better. So it actually will sit right in to these little openings. Now it doesn't have a little bezel for the bolt that you would find like on an LSA or 3-bar GM map sensor. But it does work. This is hardware that comes with this intake. And if you take the screw like this with this really large washer style head and you ran it down into that hole, it will hold this sensor down and you make that connection and now you're done. I say done, but what I mean is after you've drilled out this port per the instructions so the vacuum will pull from that sensor. Now the next thing you're gonna need to spend additional money on is a set of new injector seals or O-rings, which you probably should have some anyway if your engine's old and your O-rings are all crusty. But if you have these truck injectors like we do, they're gonna be loose in here. That's not gonna work or seal. So that is no good. This part number from General Motors, 125-706-21, comes with another set of these skinny ones and a set of these fat boys, which I imagine were probably made for the top of the injector to go into the rail, which the ones I had on mine fit perfectly into the rail like they're supposed to, nice and snug. But I'm gonna change these bottom ones out for these thick boys that came in this kit, and that's gonna make them, well, hopefully seal nicely in this intake. I went ahead with some compressed air and kind of blew and cleaned these injectors out a little bit before installing the correct O-rings that we just mentioned. And pro tip, put a little motor oil on these O-rings. They go in a little easier, and I recommend 5W30 full synthetic. When installing these fuel rails, if you don't have the short injectors to where they can be bolted to this setting, they're gonna have to be in one of these two, which if it's on the top one, that's fine. You're not gonna have an issue, but if you have to bolt it to the middle one, like I'm gonna have to, there's gonna be a gap where you bolt this to it. You can see how it hits at the top. Let's see. You can see how it hits the fuel rail at the top and still leaves a space there. So I'm gonna have to, I guess, supply my own washers for this, which is pretty disappointing considering these are like the most expensive fuel rails on the market. They come with just the rails, these 4 bolts and washers. And the intake itself comes with the hold down bolts, washers, throttle body bolts and washers, and then those coarse thread guys that hold your sensors in, of course the gasket. But for what you spend on this, you'd think they'd at least provide you some washers or spacers in case you need to use this length injector. Also, while we're here, I don't think I pointed out, there's nitrous bungs on the outside of each runner and on the inside of each runner, so that's pretty dope. Now that we have all of our fuel fittings, we can get this system all kind of semi-assembled and then put it in the truck. These are -8 O-ring threaded the way you receive them. So I've got this -8 plug on the passenger side back of it. By the way, these are like, a lot of the stuff's Evil Energy or this Potavel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I get this stuff on Amazon. I've got 3 of these because that's what we're gonna have threaded on the driver's side, because we have the entire fuel system. This truck is all push to connect and it has a -6 fitting there. To join these front guys together, I'll have to put this -8 O-ring to -6 AN on both of the ends of these fuel rails, and then do these 90-6 to push to connect. And then I'll cut a section of this hose, which is high performance push-on hose. These are E85 compatible too. And this fuel system runs at like 58 to 60 PSI. So believe it or not, this stuff works excellently, and you should not ever need to put hose clamps on it. They actually say that's detrimental to the science behind these push-on fuel system hoses. All right, do a little fuel system test. You can usually smell it before you see it. I've got neither going on, so we happy. Throw that air intake tube on so we can test fire it. All right, let's put it back together. And done. I will say I don't love what I had to do to modify this air intake tube, and had to set the camera up under the inside of the hood and sort of close it a few times, making some adjustments. I'm sure I'll probably change this. I think order some kind of piece of pipe that just makes this 30-degree bend and drops off to the air filter. Again, I don't love it. It doesn't look all that great or on purpose. I don't know, not really sure. You kind of do what you got to do whenever you want to keep your mechanical fan, which I absolutely love. I know a lot of people can't stand that look, but this thing never, ever, ever overheats. You can sit in 105-degree weather with the air conditioner on. The transmission temps won't even go above like 145 degrees. It just works. Looks pretty cool. This engine bay definitely needed a change from that stock looking intake, so it didn't look so much like a guy just put an engine from a salvage in his old truck and called it a day, regardless of how much time you spend making everything look nice and neat. There's just no getting around that ugly stock Vortec intake. Well, time to find out if we got ourselves a race car. I'm honestly a little concerned and anticipating a check engine light with switching out that map sensor to that different style. Not sure if it's going to have to be taught or anything. So far so good, but sometimes these things don't show up right away. Man, I really like this truck. It's going to be hard to get rid of. Try this again. Woo! I don't know if we lost any. I'm sure we didn't gain much on a run like that. Just traction would have been such an issue and a variable that it would be hard to measure. I can tell you the Heine dyno says it runs just as good on the low end as it did with the Trailblazer SS intake, and as we've discussed ad nauseum, that was kind of the number one concern with switching this, that it would be high-end power only. So good choice, pretty expensive, but you know, if you got everything else done on your ride and you just got that stock intake down there just looking ugly, especially on these truck intakes, do it, you know. And I didn't get any special pricing or anything for that intake, but I'd take some. As always, I appreciate you guys watching very much. Be sure to subscribe and like and all the things that YouTube channel owners tell you to do. I do appreciate the feedback though